I'd like to share 3 simple but difficult steps to see outside our biological limitations and behavioral programming. These steps will not make any sense without a little bit of groundwork being covered. Anyone familiar with this channel knows that this is not an attempt to make you stay till the end. The information prior to these steps is important, as we know that jumping into deep waters is far less jarring when prepared. So right off the bat, I would like to say a couple things that will either make you change the channel altogether or more eager to climb down this rabbit hole with me. The reality we perceive is a fractal of a more complex infinite reality. Think of the shadow of a cube. It's a square or a hexagram. We don't see the cube, but instead we see the shadow, and that is the reality in which we live. So a long ass time ago, but also kind of yesterday, human beings were created as capsules that are meant to act as little schools. I'm not Joe Phipps any more than you are Tyler Joseph or whatever your name is. The entity who is really us is something that we cannot imagine with our mammalian brain. This prison is often referred to as the black cube for metaphorical purposes. This cosmic entity that is the self with a capital S decides to teach itself about something and needs to learn directly, not spoken of or read about, but experienced firsthand. We call this Gnosis. We enter the black cube to encounter suffering, as this is the fastest way to grow. No mud, no lotus. Although sometimes we regret it. When the self enters the black cube, it is not one body or even 2, but very many different bodies in different timelines even. If you have ever met someone that you just instantly click with, or someone that you just and hate with all your guts, this very well could be a fractal of you emanating from the self. This formless entity we call the self remembers all things experienced within the black cube in order to bring this information back to the halls of a mentee, or the absolute, or unified field, whatever you want to call it depending on your culture. This information is then studied and clarified. This higher self retains memory in timeless space, and our animal bodies tend to pick up on that memory. And when we pick up that frequency, it will cause a phenomenon called deja vu. Like radio waves that are picked up by changing the station, our mind can also change frequencies to pick up bigger portions of reality. There are those who can pick up this frequency naturally without any kind of help. In today's society, we call them mentally ill. In the world of yesterday, they were called mystics and shamans. An Oriental proverb states that freedom does not exist. Instead, only the act of freeing ourselves. But what are we freeing ourselves from? What steps can we take to become liberated like those that are born with this divine gift? The word shaman loosely translates to one who knows deeper origins. How can a shaman or a mystic have access to billions of years of information? Well, there is only one thing that's been around for that long, and it's called DNA. So in today's society, we treat symptoms but are deathly afraid of the cure. In psychology, we medicate or talk to a guy with a clipboard because we're afraid to get to the core of who we are. As Jung states, that is about the most frightening thing a person can do. And in medicine, we treat symptoms instead of curing diseases. We seem to be deathly afraid to face those that are withholding the cures, or afraid to be scrutinized by our peers for simply understanding that many times over, brilliant men and women have indeed figured out various cures to ailments like cancer and AIDS. Getting to the seed of these problems means digging through the mud and shit that it grows in. So we oftentimes just choose comfort. All shamanic practices speak of a secret language that they encounter gnostically, a language that is also said to be a ladder that connects heaven and earth. This ladder or spiraling staircase, it's kind of an ascension into a higher world, and that symbolism has been adopted by the Freemasons, as you can see with their staircase of 3, 5, and 7. In addition to ladders, the shamans also speak of twin serpents the world over. In fact, the word Quetzalcoatl can be translated to mean magnificent twin. It takes both to create life. This makes me wonder if the concept is the origin of dual thinking that has been transcended by the Zen masters and philosophers like Carl Jung. Twin serpents and spiraling ladders, of course, was symbolic for what we know now as DNA, as proposed quite convincingly by Jeremy Narby. Over 97% of our DNA is considered junk DNA. The reason we call it this is simply because it doesn't create code for making proteins. I can't help but think of how short-sighted this is, considering that nature is not likely to create anything extra or unnecessary for survival. Knowing damn well that DNA sequences are indeed a form of language, this tells me that there must be some kind of message encoded within this so-called junk DNA. A widespread axiom ponders the idea of God hiding the deepest meaning of the universe from man in order for it to only be attained by those who are worthy. The allegory goes that he reflected upon hiding it on the moon. Then one day humans could get there and it might be the wrong humans to find it. Then he considered hiding it in the depths of the ocean, but just like the moon, it might be found by those who are corrupt. He then concluded that he would put his secrets within the inner sanctum of man's own being. Then only those who truly deserve will be able to understand. Mystics the world over in different ways have claimed that burning within their abdomens, a twin serpent energy would rise up through the spine and explode in their heads, propelling them into what is called, quote, the other world. Although called many things, it's most familiar to us as resembling Kundalini. Modern science rails firmly against shamanic practices and mystic rituals such as trances and usage of hallucinogens, and at the same time praises modern academics like Francis Crick, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering the construct of what DNA is. But so ironically, it's an absolute fact that Francis Crick was blasted out of his mind on hallucinogens when he had his epiphanous discovery of DNA. Plant drugs, or as we should call them, plant teachers, have been utilized to connect man to his DNA for thousands of years. In fact, if you break down the word Entheogens, we can see that the suffix theo, meaning God, and the prefix en, meaning within, points in the direction of meaning God within. It's so pleasantly ironic that this word that we demonize literally means to awaken God within. Hallucinogens show us the limitations of science. Plant teachers teach us more than we can teach ourselves, as they have been here the entire time that we have. The question arises, are the beings in these hallucinations real? Well, let's consider the fact that the eye does not see. It's only a lens. An eyeball is a lens. The seeing that takes place happens in the back of the brain anatomy in a section called the occipital. Okay, Google, how do I pronounce occipital lobe?
Here are some details.
Just say it.
Occipital lobe.
Thank you. A section that we call the occipital lobe, and we still don't know how it works, but the mystics did. When a person experiences vivid hallucinations after changing the channel of their DNA frequency, the images they see are not caused by external stimuli, therefore, in a way, making it more real than anything ever seen by the eye, which can be tricked. When a teaching is experienced, the word real goes out the window. Whenever we use the word real, we accidentally tend to mean physical matter, which doesn't actually matter at all. In all shamanic cultures, the archetype stands that non-material beings not only interact with, but actually maintain and form our reality. This, of course, reminds us of the concept of the higher self and the physical body as an etheric schooling system. Very common in psychedelic experiences, even that of ayahuasca of the Peruvians, the participants encounter what we call today as the Greys. If you guys haven't checked out yet, Supernatural by Graham Hancock, I cannot recommend this book enough. There's a section in here where, this motherfucker went down to the jungle and did this shit for himself. He does his hands-on research, unlike a lot of the scientists of today that kind of cower behind their desks. In his notes, I mean, what's that look like to you? So this raises a lot of questions. Besides that, and he's not the only one. If you look at some of these pieces of artwork, and I'll put the actual artwork up on the screen to be seen more clearly in color, but there's parallels to be made here. I want to read a short section from Graham's notes here, if I can find it. Graham wrote in his notes the next day, "They seem to have business with me. They want to communicate. The communication or attempt feels telepathic, but somehow it's not getting through. I sense eagerness and frustration on their part. And anyone who has dabbled in hallucinogens that have encountered these creatures knows that they're eager to teach us something that we can't seem to grasp. I mean, we're mammals. It's like trying to teach an ant calculus. It doesn't work, but they're attempting to." There are multiple parallels between shamanic practices and alien abduction experiences, indicate an idea that those from the quote other world are trying to help us and guide humanity. And so after a night of ayahuasca, a good thorough session, Graham Hancock sketched and wrote in his notebook. A portion of it. Yeah, I know you guys are telling me to reset the timer on my fucking screen. I haven't got around to it yet. He wrote in his notebook, "Spirit and matter, as above, so below. Science teaches us to believe that the material world is the primary and only reality. But from the ayahuasca perspective, this is absolutely not the case. What we call material world is only a part of the pattern." End quote. A quick side note, speaking of Graham Hancock's masterpiece, Supernatural, which is now called Visionary, by the way. The world over, cave paintings show human hybrids, human bodies with animal heads. This is not limited to cave paintings either, as we've seen Egyptian hieroglyphs. This archetype is so mysterious. I have been dabbling in it for, years now, and I still haven't figured it out. But it is worth mentioning here, considering the topic of today being shamans and mystics and shit. Many cultures describe beings that come from the other world and into our own through the art of shapeshifting. These masters of transformation are said to often take on the form of reptiles. But when the changing of form takes place, it is described as looking like a kaleidoscope. And what's that remind us of? Cave paintings in the back of caves that are meant to, be safe from weathering. This is not for the sake of art, but for the sake of sending a message to generations later. In the image I'll show right here, we can see that it's an overlapping image on top of another image, which to the viewer seems nonsensical. But we can tell it's not meant to be art. If it was meant to be art, each image would be segregated. That's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at something that is meant to tell us something. And I'll put it up on the screen here. A personal experience of mine has a very similar aspect to it. That seems to be an egregore of consciousness, kind of a library of sentience that has become one entity. Plants don't communicate like human beings. They don't communicate in the form of abstract symbols, words, and pictures, but they sure as do communicate. It's worth noting that other species of human like Neanderthal didn't utilize symbols or language, and this emerged strictly with Homo erectus. Homo erectus. I worked it in there. Something I'm gonna have to check my notes on real quick. Let me check my notes on it real quick. Oh man. Yeah, these notes are great. I'm so fortunate to have this great notebook to put my notes in. Buy this. Plants don't have eyes like we do, but they have photoreceptors along their entire mitochondria, just like the anatomy of the human eye. This is called plastogloobuli. Plastogloobuli. I've had just about enough of all this Apple talk. Comment from the peanut gallery about having a, what kind of phone do I have? Is this a, I have a regular phone, which is not a Apple phone. So I guess life is just harder for me. All right, so for pronunciation's sake, right now we're saying plastogloobuli. Globuli. Pronounce it how it's a mouth noise. You get it. So if you want to get weird with mouth noises for it, there you go. But you understand, plants can see. No matter how you phrase it, plants can see color and hear sound. And you can bet your ass they communicate with each other. And as long as we learn to pay attention, they communicate with us. Good example that I'm just now realizing, Jeremy Narby, when I read this, it fucked my brain up. So I'm gonna read it to you. He had been having back pain, and he was complaining about it to these the Peruvians, where they gave him a concoction made from plants. He warned me that I would feel cold, that my body would seem rubbery for 2 days, and that I would see some images. I was skeptical, thinking that if it were really possible to cure chronic back pain with vegetal tea, Western medicine would surely know about it. You guys kind of see where this is going. On the other hand, I thought it was worth trying because it could not be less effective than the cortisone injections. That's what he had been using as a treatment. I drank the Sanango tea. After 20 minutes, a wave of cold submerged me. I felt chilled to the bone. I broke out into a profuse cold sweat and had to wring out my sweatshirt several times. He's wearing a sweatshirt. This is the jungle. That doesn't make any... After 6 rather difficult hours, the cold feeling went away, but I no longer controlled the coordination of my body. I could not walk without falling down. For 5 minutes, I saw an enormous column of multicolored lights across the sky. These were my only hallucinations. The lack of coordination lasted 48 hours. On the morning of the 3rd day, my back pain had disappeared. It has not returned. I tend not to believe this kind of story unless I have lived it myself. And neither would I, but I'm gonna go ahead and take Narby's word for it because this book is brilliant. Like suggested by the Beatles, it is a cornerstone in Zen to own nothing. I feel like this could be for a bigger reason than just humility and lack of material goods. If we have nothing such as desire and possessions to protect, it makes us not susceptible to being fed upon by the archons of the Gnostic demiurge. Yeah, there's gonna be like a lot of you who didn't understand that. That's okay. If you do, thanks for watching. Neem Karoli Baba, who was the guru of spiritual teacher Ram Dass. He was never seen giving lectures, offering courses, or even taking donations, although he performed loving, humilitous miracles on a regular basis. His religion was kindness and love. When asked how to help the world, he would say very simple things like, feed people. Known as Maharaji, would go into a state of samadhi, where he would do charitable work on multiple planes of existence. To those who were worthy or fortunate enough, he could induce the state of samadhi just by peering at a person. Everything that the Baba did was from a place of love, which is by all means cemented his message in stone, especially through the spiritual teachings of Ram Dass. And on a much darker end of that same spectrum, ironically, would be a man who I consider to be a philosopher, but also by definition a mystic, just like the Shamans and Maharaji. But every video I've seen on Carl, they always seem to introduce him as Swiss psychologist or analyst blah, blah, blah. I, however, will be referring to Carl as a philosopher and a mystic because that's what he was and still is to me. I'm going to be honest with you. To this day, I have not finished the Red Book. I always end up putting it down in order to grow a bit more, and then I'll attempt to take another bite out of it after I've evolved a bit intellectually. The problem used to be not understanding it, but now, ironically, the problem is that sometimes I accidentally do understand it, and it really frightens me down to my core. And I'm here to tell you right now that if you breeze through Carl Jung's Red Book without having an existential crisis, you haven't understood it. The universe, so to speak, seemed to force against his will a form of understanding that would redirect the rest of his life. This dark period in Carl's career can be compared to our video concerning the dark night of the soul. He experienced visions, premonitions, and otherworldly concepts that could be translated into words only loosely. It was from this dark and confusing period of Carl's life that we now have terms like synchronicity, introvert and extrovert, the shadow archetype, and a myriad of other notions that can be used as tools in self-completion today. Friedrich Nietzsche, years before, like Carl, dove into the darkest depths of his own mind for the sake of his life's work and the betterment of humanity. Knowing damn well what happened to Fred, Carl did the same, but was able to survive it. You might remember a series of books called Magic Eye, if you're a 90s kid especially. These books had 3D illusions built into each picture that were made of patterns. There's at least a few of you right now exploding with excitement, not having any idea where this is going, but yeah, those books were cool. If you can't see the illusions within these patterns, it's probably because you have an iPhone. I'm going to edit that out. Each page had 2 images, one of which could not be seen until the viewer defocused his eyes and relaxed enough to let the vision come to him. For right now, let's call that action defocalization. This is an absolute perfect metaphor for how we can see through the black cube of our limitations. Anyone who studies hard, difficult subjects, or practices a trade, or commits to learning a musical instrument and so on, has probably noticed that the old adage is true: practice makes perfect. But practice is not where ideas and breakthroughs come from. We know that going for a walk or staring into the night sky or any other form of break from study and practice is where truly groundbreaking ideas seem to emerge. When we corner ourselves to perfecting a craft or learning a subject, we oftentimes just run in circles to grasp something that is just right outside of our reach. It's only when we pull away from that intense study that epiphanies seem to arise as a result of the duality between hyper-focused practice and taking a breather. To put it bluntly, ideas pop up when we don't focus on our work. When attempting to transcend the limitations of the black cube, I have noticed in my experience that there are 3 cornerstone steps involved. The first of which is sobriety. I'm going to be a hypocrite here, but let's just keep moving here. Sobriety allows us to become in touch with both our psychological nature in a raw format, as well as cuts off any blockages from the information that we can gain from our DNA, which we've learned is alive and speaks. I know it sucks to hear, but even today's neuroscientists have found that substances like alcohol and marijuana will reduce the amount of dreamless sleep that is required for the brain to rejuvenate. Fewer amount of you might know that entheogens like DMT will not work with people who are on SSRIs or antidepressants. Without diving into a conspiracy here, it's worth noting that it almost seems like pharmaceuticals are designed to block us from these messages encoded in our DNA, thus blocking us from our own divine nature. A disclaimer here, I'm absolutely not saying to stop taking medications or that marijuana should be ceased. In fact, in many cases, cannabis, like in the case of edibles, can lead to certain forms of gnosis, but these are temporary. I think that the key here should be the word moderation, just like the second and third step that we're about to delve into. All right, hold on a second. I gotta refill this fucking badass cup with Monster energy drink. Again, really nice cup to have. Okay, shut up. The second step is shamanic practice and mystic ritual, or deep esoteric study, so to speak. This is a broad step in a wide-ranging spectrum of activity. It really means what suits you best. This could be through meditation and yoga, breathing exercises, kriya, or just reading and studying abstract ideas that expand your mind, or even religious and spiritual practices. In any case, though, the key is to go in hard and completely submerge yourself in whatever it is that you are attempting to attain or shed. The key here is isolation. When practicing these activities or studying these abstract subjects, you are best without distractions from outside stimulus. A person oftentimes is quick to run and tell their friends and family about what they've learned and what they've been up to, but we should refrain from that for the sake of cerebral hygiene. Just like the magic eye patterns, this will not bring us to Gnosis alone, no matter how deep we focus on the subject at hand, which brings us to our third step. What we just referred to as defocalization means to break away from the second step completely. Hang out with kids, converse with friends and family about everyday normal life, and celebrate the little joys of being alive, like going for a walk or eating a f***ing crumpet or something. Instead of sharing everything that you've learned, simply share yourself with others. Basically, relax from the second step and do the opposite of it. This, like Carl suggested, causes the tension of the poles to unify. And just like relaxing your eyes when looking at the patterns of an optical illusion, a new image will appear to the spectator. All right, if I get one more comment about my screen going blue, I'm gonna kick you off the platform. I'm not going to. I need subscribers. I'm broke. So a new image will appear to the spectator that will oftentimes surprise them. Something that we did not expect to see or learn will emerge from the seed of that second step, just like some kind of a dolphin will emerge from the scattered nonsense in one of these optical illusions. To recap, DNA speaks. We can speak directly to our DNA through plants or practice of meditation and other activities. And then, of course, defocalization. It probably goes without saying that diet and exercise is not going to hurt this process whatsoever. If you would like to learn more detailed, credible resources on connecting these dots, I know I've plugged it 100 times, but Cosmic Serpent by Jeremy Narby, Graham Hancock's Supernatural, known as Visionary now. But I don't want to go without mentioning Joseph Campbell. I am a Joseph Campbell addict, as well as an addict of anything that comes in sets. So these three books in particular attack the ideas of mythology in their raw format and what they're meant to teach us. But when you compare these mythologies to particular ideals of science today, there are connections to be made here. The mystics and shamans of yesterday understood the universe in a way that we don't. And as long as we stay pigeonholed to this scientific jargon of skepticism and slitting our throats on Occam's razor, there's a good chance that we never will. It's, again, like Carl suggested, to unify the opposites that will be the cornerstone of Gnosis here. In order to understand ourselves and the world around us, we cannot stick one-sidedly to one aspect and ideal to another. It is important that we take what we've learned from mythology and what potential science has and unify those opposites in order to come to clearer and more concise conclusions. You can't have one without the other. Science speaks to the mind. Philosophy and mythology speaks to the heart.
Tree grows in